gave a lecture at the State University of Moscow in July of 2013. And the Russians were astonished when they heard this, because Iran had been at work for many, many years, and Iran had presented to them a Shia version, which was different. For Iran, the major sign of Akhir Zaman is the advent of Imam al-Mahdi. So when I went to Moscow, all they were talking about is Imam al-Mahdi, Imam al-Mahdi, Imam al-Mahdi. So when I took the Quran and I brought the Quran before them, I said, no, that's wrong. The major sign of Akhir Zaman is the return of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, the true Messiah. And the most powerful voice in history to have prophesied the return of Jesus. And Mirza Ghulam Ahmad could do what he wants to do. He cannot silence that voice. The most powerful voice in history to have prophesied the return of Jesus, the son of Mary, is the voice of Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. This is the foundation of Islamic eschatology. If you reject this, you're wasting your time attending my lecture. Yes, you are wasting your time attending my lecture, because this is the foundation stone of Islamic eschatology. There are two kinds of verses in the Quran. This is in Surah Ali Imran, at the beginning of Surah Ali Imran, which is the third surah of the Quran. The Quran is comprised of two oceans of ayat. Ayat means verses. Two oceans of ayat in the Quran. The first is ayat muhkamat, or verses which are plain and clear. All that you need for this is tafsir. Tafsir means to explain. And the Quran says that these are Ummul Kitab. This is the heart of the book. But the Quran also has a second ocean of ayat. What is it called? Ayat? Ayat mutashabihat. The first one, ayat muhkamat, plain and clear. The second one, ayat mutashabihat. And these are verses which have to be interpreted to get the meaning. The Arabic word is ta'wil. The first one is tafsir, explanation. And this one is ta'wil, interpretation. Let me give you an example. In the nights of Ramadan, eat and drink. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Eat and drink until the white thread, you know what thread you make kite, you fly a kite? Huh? The white thread is distinct from the black thread of dawn. So white thread and black thread. All right? So one companion took a white thread and a black thread, put it underneath his pillow. And when the time came to start the fast, he took out the two threads and he's looking at them. And he's having some difficulty in determining when to start the fasting. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ, who very wisely did not interpret the ayah. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, no, 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 this does not mean literally the white thread and the black thread. No. This has to be interpreted. And when Allah speaks of the white thread and the black thread, Allah is speaking about the light of the day being distinct from the darkness of the night. This is called ta'weel. Ta'weel. Dajjal, the false Messiah, who has to impersonate the true Messiah and get the Jews to believe that he is the true Messiah. In Trinidad we say, get them a 6 for a 9, deceive them. Dajjal, if he is to successfully impersonate the true Messiah, will have to rule the world from Jerusalem. Because when the true Messiah comes back, that is what he's going to do. He's going to rule the world from Jerusalem. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said so, that he would be Hakimul Adil. Hakim, a ruler, Adil with justice. So Dajjal has to rule the world. Is Dajjal in the Quran? There are so many who dismiss the subject. They say, no, this is nonsense, this is not in the Quran. There is no mention of Dajjal in the Quran. It hurts me, of course, to have to utter these words. But that's schoolboy scholarship. That's not real scholarship. What you can say is that Dajjal is not to be found in the muhkamat of the Quran. But Dajjal is most certainly to be found in the mutashabihat of the Quran. Now that would be a more sensible statement. Several ayat of the Quran, particularly in Surah Al-Kahf, which are directly linked to Dajjal. Nearly everything which pertains to Dajjal needs to be interpreted, like the mountain of gold, and we'll do that tomorrow, inshallah. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, about Dajjal, that when he is released from what? He's on an island. If you've read Jerusalem in the Quran, I wrote that book about how much, 14 years ago? Right? It was published about 13 years ago. If you read that book, you'll see the hadith. The Dajjal was on an island. And he was in chains, okay? His hands were chained to his neck, his feet were chained and so on. And we don't have the time to go over that now. But when he's released, said the Prophet ﷺ, from that island, he will live on earth for how many days? 40 days. But when the Prophet uses the word 40, be careful. Because someone asked him which is the first masjid which was built. He said the Kaaba. And then they asked him which was the second masjid which was built. They said Masjid al-Aqsa, Jerusalem. And then they asked him how many years were there between the construction of the two? He said 40. What did it was a couple thousand years. He said 40. So when he uses the word 40, do not understand it literally. This is mutashabihat. Dajjal will live on earth for 40 days. One day which would be like a year, one day which would be like a month, one day which would be like a week. وَسَائِرُ أَيَّامِهِ كَأَيَّامِكُمْ, and then all the rest of his days like your days. My book, Jerusalem and the Quran, was based on this hadith. I came to the conclusion that it was only when Dajjal was in a day which is like our day, only then would we be able to see him. Because he's in our world of space and time. Prior to that, he's here on earth, but we can't see him. Are there angels in this room? Answer me. Yes, there are. Each one of us have 2 angels. Can we see them? No. Are there jinn in this room? Yes. Can we see them? No. So too with Dajjal. In his day like a year, in his day like a month, in his day like a week, he's here but we cannot see him. Only when his day is like our day, at the end of his life, then we will see him. And the Prophet said he will be a Jew, he will be a young man, he'll be powerfully built, and he'd have the curls that the Orthodox Jews have. And from Jerusalem he'll declare, I am Al-Masih, the Messiah. And they will accept him. They'll accept him. But before that, he's here on earth, but we cannot see him. I came to the conclusion that he had to pass through 3 stages of his mission before he would appear in person. And in stage 1, what he did was to build and create a ruling state in the world, namely Britain. Britain. When I was a child, we had to sing God Save the King, in school. You know about that. We had to sing God Save the King every morning before going to class. God Save the King. And then when I was 10 years of age, King George died. And then Elizabeth took over. We had to sing God Save the Queen. So Imran, Hosein was singing God Save the Queen. Now I look back at those days, you didn't have nobody to tell us? What nonsense is this? God save the king, God save the queen. Britain became the ruling state in the world. It never happened before in history. And it became known as the age of Pax Britannica. You may have heard the term. Pax Britannica, for the first time in human history, meant that one state had the power to dominate the rest of the world, and no combination of rivals